guys, it's Liv and welcome back to my channel Endless Pages. Today's video is my final TBR video for the year, my TBR for the month of December. Can't believe this year is almost up. What a year it's been. Spent 4 months of it in lockdown, so it's been a fun year. But that's okay, I'm excited for this TBR. I'm doing the Reindeer Readathon created by Eric from Break Even Books, and I will be reading potentially 9 books this month, which I'm very excited for, and I think I picked out some great books to end off the year. I will put Eric's socials and his channel in the description. I believe the official sign up is closed for the readathon, but I'll still put the announcement video in case you just want to, I don't know, follow along without like signing up. Before I forget as well, I'm going to quickly sum up what I read in the month of November. I don't think there's enough to talk about to make it its own video, so I think I'm just going to make this a super long video, so I'm sorry for the length of this video, but I just didn't think this was going to take up a whole video's worth of content, so I'm going to quickly talk about the books I read in November. First up, I read Percy Jackson and the Battle of the Labyrinth, the 4th book in the Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief series by Rick Riordan. All of these books kind of follow the same structure so far. There's always a quest and they've got to fight monsters on the quest, and there's god and goddesses that they interact with that either try and help or hinder the process. There's a kind of underlying storyline, but it's not as prevalent in the earlier books. I don't know if he's doing a similar thing to like the Harry Potter series as well, where like as you read the books they get darker, as like potentially when you were reading this when it first came out you age with the series, so I don't know if you get what I mean. Like it gets darker and more adulty as you read along, even though it's still middle grade. I don't know if that's what he's intending, but I feel like the danger is kind of increasing as the books go along, which makes the stakes higher and makes, you know, the battles and the monsters a bit more intense and more serious. I just feel like this book was a bit darker than the other ones, which I did enjoy. We did see some more, like, not permanent consequences, but like we saw some consequences of actions that started to actually really impact on the characters, which I liked, and I don't know, it gave them a bit more depth and made the story, just more enjoyable. In my opinion, I really loved the labyrinth aspect. Obviously I can't talk too much about this book because it's very spoilery because it's the 4th book in the series, but basically it's in the title. There's a labyrinth, and I thought that was super creative and a super fun way to do the quest. This is definitely my favourite so far. It's darker, there's a bit more danger, the underlying storyline is kind of starting to become a bit more prevalent, which I like as well because they've been hinting at it, and it just, again, like I said before, more danger, more darker, more stakes, and I feel like, yeah, you're reading Percy just kind of develop and get older, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Definitely my favourite so far. I gave it 5 stars. I gave it all the Percy Jackson book 5 stars, but I would give this 10 stars. Like, it was so much better than the other ones. I loved the darker. I hope the next book, the final book, again has that bit more of a darker, more serious tone to it, because yeah, when the stakes are higher and the consequences are quite serious, it makes you really feel more the pressure for the characters, and makes it a more enjoyable read overall. So great start to the reading month. Next up, I read a novella, and that was A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. This is a novella of this book series. This is the first book, The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, the first book in the Montagu siblings series by Mackenzie Lee. I can't tell you what this is about really, but I'll tell you what the first book was about briefly. It's about a guy called Monty, and he likes to party and drink and get into all kinds of trouble, and he embarks on this thing called like a grand tour with his best friend Percy and his sister Felicity, and it's just about this crazy adventure they go on where they get into all sorts of trouble, and he's kind of falling in love with his best friend Percy. So it's a really fun like historical fiction read. So this is set after the end of the first book. The second book's out which I didn't really enjoy as much, but this definitely made up for the fact that I didn't enjoy the second book. This is set after the end of the first one, and without spoiling it too much, we just kind of see where our characters are up to after the crazy events of the first book. And even though it was only like 100 odd pages, there was still a really good story to it. Even though it was so brief, it wasn't just, you know, all happy-go-lucky after the end, just everything's magically, you know, perfect, because that's not what relationships and life are like. So I liked that there was something to overcome, and I think this is definitely going to become one of my comfort reads. It's so wholesome and I love it, and I love all of the characters. Percy, Monty and Felicity are all such fun characters to read from. This was wholesome and sweet. Can't say too much other than that, but it's cute. It was so cute. I loved every second of it. I read it in a day. It was so easy to get through and just made me so happy. So yeah, I also enjoyed this book. I think I rated it 4 stars. I can't remember. 4 stars maybe? 4, 5? I don't know. Let me actually check what I rated this, because I actually can't remember. I thought I was so prepared for this video. I definitely wasn't. I rated it 4 stars. Yeah, 4 stars. 4 stars. Wholesome, cute, adorable read. The final book I read in the month of November was Bloodlike Magic by Lizal Samberg. This book is a young adult fantasy, and we follow this girl called Voya Thomas, and Voya is from a family of witches. And it's kind of set in the future. There's all this, there's a bit of a science fiction element with the technology that they use in the future, which is another fun aspect of the book. But anyway, so they got sidetracked. Yeah, so Voya is from a family of witches, and basically when you kind of start puberty and become a certain age, witches go through this test called the Calling. And the Calling, if you pass, you get your magic. And everyone's kind of magic abilities, I would say, is kind of unique to your personality. Like, it's not, you know, people can get the same power, but it's, I shouldn't say unique, it's more of a reflection of your personality. But if you fail, you lose your magic. And Voya fails her calling. This is not a spoiler, by the way, this is in the blurb. And the ancestors give her another shot. And they're like, what we want you to do is, they say, destroy your first love. But Voya has a problem. She's never been in love before. So she joins this kind of dating app. This is where this futuristic tech kind of comes in, where it matches you genetically. And it matches her with this guy called Luke, who's like a bit of a dick. He's like really grumpy, doesn't want anything to do with her, really rude. So she has to try and deal with falling in love with him and figuring out how she is going to destroy someone. So it's very high stakes. I really liked this book. I really liked Voya's character. I liked how throughout the book she was just really working on herself and just working on her kind of, I'd say her confidence in a way, and kind of becoming her own person, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading. I like any trope that wants to help improve someone's confidence. So one thing I really loved about this book was, one, the aspect of family. I think I haven't read a lot of books where family plays a massive role, especially in fantasy. In fantasy, all the characters seem to have no family, which seems to be a common trope. So it was nice to read something where it was a huge focus on the family dynamic. I thought that was a nice change, and I loved the emphasis on how much, kind of at the same time, her family made her who she is and gave her strength, but at the same time her family was also sometimes kind of doing the opposite as well, so if that makes sense. So her family was such a big part of her identity and her identity as a witch, and as well as her being a black Canadian girl and being so proud about her family's heritage. By the way, that's just trigger warning, there is seeds of like slavery and could be some triggering things, so just make sure to check the trigger warnings before you read this book as well. So I think that just added so many layers to the character and her identity and made it such an interesting way to read a book, and how the witch community and family was such a big part of a witch's identity as well. just gave all, like, you know, the characters all these depths and the story, like, great depth. And yeah, I thought it made the story quite well developed and really fun to read. The book could get a little bit repetitive at times. Like, I feel like the pace was a little bit slow moving, but I mean, I would rather that than insta-love, because I hate insta-love with a fiery passion. So I guess it did make it realistic, and it wasn't like a task or a choice that anyone could easily make, I don't think. So, you know, you did see, I mean, it was bad and good in a way, because you did still see that conflict within her mind, which is good. So I guess I shouldn't complain too much. I like the ending. I don't think the ending was meant to be a massive surprise. I think it was made quite obvious, so I don't think you were meant to, like, be super shocked by it, and I wasn't. But that's okay, because I saw it coming. I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. I loved the emphasis of her heritage, on her identity, not only as a Black Canadian girl, but also as a witch. I loved the aspect of the different witch families. I loved the futuristic tech, and I loved the aspect of family in this book. This was a really, really good read. I gave it 4 stars, and it was the last book I read in November, so I had a really good reading month. I read this, I read Gentleman's Guide to Getting Lucky, and Battle of the Labyrinth. So it was a good reading month. Even though I always say, like, I only read 3 books, and I'm going to stop saying that, because it's not a race, it's a hobby, and I should stop. I think a lot of readers do that, compare themselves to others, and be like, oh, I haven't read enough, or this person read so much more than me. I had a great reading month. I read 3 great books. I had 1 5-star and 2 4-star reads, so I should be happy with that, and I am. So I'm going to try and stop saying I read 3 books and it was a great reading month. That was really, really long, so I'm actually going to jump into the books I'm reading this month now. Now finally for December and the Reindeer Readathon. So we have our prompts. I'm looking at my notes on the floor, and all the prompts are named after reindeers, which is super cute. Number 1 is Dasher, so that's read a short story or a collection or a novella. So I'm going to be reading this, which is a collection of fairy tales, Tales from the Hinterland by Melissa Albert. So to make sense of what this book kind of is, it's a book from this book called The Hazelwood, and Alice's grandma in this book is this reclusive author who wrote a book called Tales from the Hinterland. So she finally actually published the book of fairy tales, so you can read the fairy tales that are talked about in this book, and the characters that kind of appear in this book. We can read about their fairy tales here. Basically, The Hazelwood's about this girl called Alice, and strange things always kind of happen around her, and she doesn't really know her grandma. All she knows is that she's an author of this book, and she's kind of fascinated by this book. And she gets a letter to say that her grandmother is dead, and her mother gets taken, and there's just a note that kind of says stay away from the Hazelwood, which is where her grandmother lives. So she kind of has to venture into the Hazelwood to figure out what's going on with her mum, and why all this weird stuff and bad luck always happens around her. So you actually get to read the fairy tales from this book here, which I love, and I'm very excited to get into, because I've been meaning to read it for a while, and this prompt is the perfect excuse to read it. I hope my explanation kind of made sense. Basically, book of fairy tales that is talked about in the Hazelwood. Yeah. The second prompt is Dancer, and that is read a book from a favourite author. A favourite author of mine is Schwab. So this, I swear to God, this is the last time I am putting this on a TBR video. If you watch my other videos, you know it's been on like every single TBR, and I'm sick of not being finished it, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by Schwab. I swear I'm going to finish this book if it's the last thing I do this year. This is the last time I'm going to tell you the plot, I swear. It's about Addie, and she lives in 1700s France. It's historical fiction, by the way. Young adult. And yeah, so Addie lives in 1700s France, and she wants to kind of escape the life she's currently living. She doesn't want to live like this anymore, so she makes a deal at night that she's given the ability to be able to live forever. However, there's a catch, and everyone she meets doesn't remember who she is, so it's quite a lonely life. We jump about 300 years, we kind of follow Addie throughout time, and Addie goes into this bookshop and a guy remembers who she is. So I have read, let's see, 100 pages of this book, and it's just very slow paced, but the writing's amazing. So I swear to you, I'm going to finish this book. I'm so determined to just finish this book this year, finally be done with it, because I am enjoying it. I want to get it done. I'm going to read this book, I swear, I swear. Book number 3 is Prancer, and that is a book with a travel element, like a quest or a vacation or something like that. So I chose Percy Jackson and the Last Olympian. This is the 5th book in the Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief series by Rick Riordan. This usually has some kind of, as I've said before, quest element, and there's always a lot of travel in this book, so that's why I chose this one. I don't think there's much I can say other than I hope it's good. So number 4 is Vixen, a book that has recently caught your eye, and that one is I'm Widow by Reindeer. This is a young adult fantasy book, and it caught my eye because I'd seen heaps of people talk about it. So when I walked into the bookshop, it was like the first thing I saw. So I was like, it's a sign, and the cover is gorgeous. It was like calling out for me to buy it, so I did, because this is quite a recent purchase for me. It's quite a recent release as well, so that's why it's a recent purchase. This is about boys, and it's set in a place called, well, I'm not going to try and pronounce that because I'm going to make a mess of it. And they pilot these alien fighting robots that beyond this thing called the Wall. And females kind of act as like concubines, co-pilots that are kind of expected to sacrifice their lives. So we follow our main character who becomes one of these female concubines, but survives her first battle, and she's given the title of, what's it called again? An Iron Widow. It's the name of the book. She's given the title of an Iron Widow, which is quite a revered title. So the reason she signed up to be a female co-pilot is that she wanted revenge against the male pilot that caused her sister's death. And once she's given the title of Iron Widow, she realizes what power she holds, and she works to save more females' lives and stop more females from getting sacrificed. Okay, and then we have Comet, which is a 5-star prediction. I'm just going to chuck that on the floor, sorry for the noise. And for that one I chose Violent Ends, which is the 2nd book in the These Violent Delights duology by Chloe Gong. This is a young adult historical fiction series, and I'll tell you about the 1st book because I obviously can't tell you about the 2nd book. It is a retelling of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, but it's set in 1920s Shanghai, which is the coolest setting ever. And we follow Juliet Kai, who is the heiress to the Scarlet Gang. And there's a rival gang who are kind of a Russian gang called the White Flowers, whose heir is called Roma Montagov, I can't say that, and they were at a time dating, and Roma was her first love until he betrayed her, but stories of a monster and a contagion are starting to spread throughout the streets of Shanghai, so Roma and Juliet are kind of forced to work together to stop this monster and save their city. Otherwise there won't be a city left for them to kind of rule. So enemies to lovers, fantastic, my favourite trope. I gave this book a 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. The setting of Shanghai was fantastic. Her vivid, like her writing just gave me this vivid picture of what Shanghai looked like. It's so descriptive, so beautiful, and I love Roma. I love Roma so much. So I'm excited but really scared to read the sequel because I'm not ready. I'm not emotionally ready to say goodbye to the characters, and I know, I just have a feeling Our Violent Ends, like, it's gonna be sad, I know it. So that's gonna be my 5th book. I don't have it yet, hasn't arrived, but when it does I'll be picking it up straight away. Number 6 is Cupid, Take a Shot at a New Author. So that author is Catherine Arden, and the book is The Bear and the Nightingale. I've heard lots of good stuff about this book. quickly, it's just set in Russia about this old servant. She tells stories of the Winter King, magic and folklore to the children of this family. But one child, Basia, kind of knows that these are more than stories. She can kind of sense spirits guarding her home. And she also realizes that there are growing forces of dark magics in the woods. Number 7 is Donna. Pick a book where the primary colour is either red or green. So I chose green, and that is Loki Where Mischief Lies by Mackenzie Lee. This is a young adult fantasy book, and we follow kind of a younger version of Loki, and Loki really wants to prove himself to be heroic, even though everyone just around him assumes that he's just going to be a villain. So following his father Odin's orders, he goes to London in the 19th century to investigate a bunch of murders, and while he's down there he is put on this path to discover potentially where he got his powers. Loki is one of my favourite characters in the MCU, so I'm excited to see him as a younger person. Him messing around in 19th century London sounds very fun, and just see how Mackenzie Lee interprets his character. Number 8 is Blitzen. This was an interesting prompt. He said pick 3 books and either get someone to pick one of them for you. You can do a Twitter poll, you can put them on the ground and get your pet to pick. So I did a Twitter poll to pick this book. I said my 3 books were Circe by Madeline Miller, Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerry Manicello, and As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. And this one by a landslide, and that's Circe by Madeline Miller. This book is set in the house of Helios, and he is the god of the sun and the mightiest titan, and he has a daughter called Circe, and Circe is, they call her weird. She's not beautiful like her mother, she's not powerful and strong like her father, but she does discover she has the power of witchcraft. So the god Zeus sees this as a massive threat to the god's powers and banishes her to this island to live out her life alone. And the island gets all types of visitors. And one day the island is visited by Odysseus, and the story goes that Circe will risk everything for Odysseus. So this sounds really intriguing. I read, what's it called? Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and loved that. I don't usually read Greek mythology, but with Percy Jackson and the Song of Achilles, I'm starting to get into it, so I thought this was the next step to reading more Greek mythology. And everyone I've talked to said this book is amazing. The bookseller that sold it to me, he was like, this is a great feminist retelling of the story, which I love to hear. That made me want to read it even more. So this is meant to be a really good read. Hopefully it's not too overhyped for me, but I have high expectations. Oh my gosh, we finally made it to the last book. Book number 9 is Readathon, and that is Read a Standalone Book, and for that one I decided to choose Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This is a young adult historical fiction. It follows a character called Lily, and Lily is a Chinese American living in Chinatown in San Francisco in the 1950s. And Lily's always had these kind of questions about herself, and she starts to realise something once she walks into a lesbian bar called the Telegraph Club. And there's also another situation going on. There's the Red Scare paranoia that's threatening her community and putting her father at risk of deportation even though he is a citizen. And Lily starts to form a relationship with this girl called Kath, and Lily and Kath will risk everything to let their love see the light of day. I have started reading this because it's the first when I'm filming this. I've read about 40 pages so far, so this will be my first read of the month, even though I've mentioned it last. Let me know what you're planning on reading in the month of December. I am always open to chat in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Subscribe maybe if you liked this video, maybe, and want to see more. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!